Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Red Light Sports Network. This is the Red Light Sports Ramble. I am Troy Otradovic, as always, joined with Evan Watallison out in the wonderful land of Wisconsin. And Evan, today we have a special guest coming on the air. Rob Reischel is going to come on. He's been on the show before. He's a wonderful guest. We're going to have Packer talk tonight. A lot of things to talk about in Packer free agency. The Combine is done, and so now there's a lot of Packer news and a lot of speculation on what's going to happen between now and the draft. So while we're waiting for Rob to join us, why don't you fill the listeners in as to some of the things that are happening in the world of free agency rumor?
Well, the first one is that it looks like Sam Shields is looking for similar to money to what Tim Jennings got, which is a $22 million contract with $8 million of it guaranteed. So that's what it's looking like. Shields is interested in. And a couple weeks back when we talked about Ian Rappaport's article in regards to the Packers and what they're looking to do on defensive line, it seemed like B.J. Raji and Ryan Pickett's days in Green Bay were all but over because there was talk that they were looking to get smaller on the defensive line, get more athletic, more versatile, and Raji did not live up to the $8 million contract that they did offer him. So there was talk that they might let Raji go as well, and now there's talk that they're bringing him back. And it looks like Rob has joined us, so I'm going to put him live. How's it going, Rob?
Good, gentlemen. How are you?
Hey, Rob.
Doing good.
Hi, guys.
Evan,
Glad you can join us today because the off-season news is starting to, the rumors and stuff is starting to heat up, and we'd love to, we want to get you on, just kind of get your opinion on some of the rumors that have been out there. So,
well, happy to go over them, guys.
well, the first thing is, Rob, the Combine ended, and, I know we're going to talk a lot about Packers today, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about there, and Evan and I were talking about this 30 minutes goes real quick, so I'll just get quick point. From the Combine, your biggest winner and your biggest loser from the Combine over the weekend.
Guys, I wasn't at the Combine, so it's probably hard for me to speak on that. I'll just say this. I think a lot of people anticipated Clowney would put up numbers that would be off the charts, but he still had to go and do it. But if anybody had any concerns about his off the field stuff, those weren't going to go away. What he could do at the Combine more than anything is help himself. And just kind of reiterate what everybody thought is that he tests like a physical freak, and he did that certainly in a lot of the speed stuff, maybe not quite as much on the weightlifting side of things. But I think he leaves as a winner and maybe the front runner now again to be the top pick in the draft. I think there's some wide receivers that certainly helped himself. The Watkins kid, I think, is a guy who helped himself immensely. Losers, I don't know, guys, exactly how I want to address that one. I don't, I wasn't there. There's obviously some guys that are going to fall with their tests and stuff like that. But, keep in mind, I've been to several combines in the past. NFL executives go down there. Their board is 90% done. It still comes back to the tape and what these guys did at their respective colleges for 3 and 4 years. All the Combine does is adjust your board slightly. A guy like Chris Borland did not run a good time, did not test all that terrific. But is he going to fall to the 5th round because of that? Absolutely not. You put on any tape, you put on the Ohio State tape from last year. Same thing even with a guy like Abadaris, whose tests were in the middle somewhere. you watch him go head-to-head against Roby in that Ohio State game, and you know this guy's a playmaker. He's probably going to be in the league for 7 to 10 years. Same thing with Borland. So the numbers at the combine might not be terrific for guys like that, but they're not going to get crushed or devastated and fall 2 and 3 rounds, because of those numbers. Now, Sam's probably a loser, guys, in terms of the test numbers he put up down there. I don't even think it's gonna, the fact of the gay side of things and the homosexuality is even going to be an issue with a lot of teams. It's going to be, can this guy play football? And what position is he going to be? He's obviously was a terrific college player, but where do you put him in the NFL? He's probably a loser out of that. But again, most of these boards were set. All that's happening is guys are maybe moving 5, 10, 15 spots on a draft board. Maybe Sam falls a little bit further, but for the most part, guys, I think the combine, all it is, it's the medical side of things you want to get done. You want to meet face-to-face and do interviews with these guys, but at the end of the day, it still comes back to the tape, and like so many guys will tell you, the tape just doesn't lie.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it, too. When I'm reading up on these players and, looking up some of the footage I'm able to look at, the tape doesn't lie, and Borland's tape obviously doesn't lie. Apidaris' tape doesn't lie. But now looking at the current roster with the Packers, and a couple weeks back, Ian Rappaport was talking about, at the time it was just below $30 million, but now it's looking a little like about $31 million in cap space the Packers could have. And he was talking about how they might be looking to sign 5 defensive free agents. What was your initial reaction when you heard that, knowing how Ted Thompson doesn't typically go the free agent route?
I'll say 2 things on that, Evan. First off, I respect Rappaport's work quite a bit, and he's right a lot more than he's wrong. But when I did read that report, I just kind of chuckled. Because at the end of the day, it's like the average Joe who says to himself, I'd love to date 5 supermodels, and the majority of his life he's dated women that are middle of the pack. Well, he's not going to go out tomorrow and date 5 supermodels in all likelihood. And I kind of, use that same analogy with Ted here. He's had, Ted's had a lot of cap money on various years as well, and he ends up banking it, and they play a season 10, 11, 12, $15 million under the cap. I think Ted will probably go the route of a couple of mid-level guys, but if anybody out there is expecting Ted Thompson to break the bank and spend $8 million on a safety, to find a replacement, let's just say for Jermichael Finley, and pay him $7 million a year, to find a couple of defensive linemen that he's going to spend a lot of money on. I don't see that happening whatsoever. I think he does a couple of short 2-year, $6 million type free agent deals, maybe with another inside linebacker or a safety or something like that. But I don't see him going out and getting a guy like Bird or players like that. It's just not in Ted's nature to do it that way. There's been some grumblings from some veterans. Tramon Williams was vocal about it at the end of last year. I think Ted's even getting maybe a little bit of a bug put in his ear from McCarthy and Rodgers that maybe we do need to get a little bit older and not only do it the draft and develop way, but it's the way he's always done it. I mean, guys like Charles Woodson have complained about this in the past, and Ted just doesn't budge. So anybody that thinks he's going to go out and get 5 of these guys, again, you have to see it to believe it, I think. And we've never seen that from Ted. History's our greatest indicator, and at the end of the day, I just can't imagine that he goes and gives a free agent the kind of a deal he did several years ago with a guy like Charles Woodson.
Yeah, I'm right.
Yeah, I kind of had the same reaction to you. I kind of chuckled, and I'll let Troy get in a second. But the first names that popped in my head when I saw that is guys like Brandon Chiller or Brady Papinga, those low, mid-level free agents. So that's just why I'll leave it at that.
So when I
that totally makes sense, guys. I mean, it's just not in, like I said, it's just not in Ted's character. It's, he signed Jeff Saturday to the 2-year deal, a couple years back, heading into the 2012 season. But prior to that, I mean, his last real big free agent splash, like you said, Evan, was Chiller, and that was 08. So there was quite a gap in there. In 06, he did Woodson and Pickett. But, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the years, he just doesn't sign anybody. Or if he does, it's a guy like a Frank Walker or somebody like that. It's just not going to – I just don't see it happening, guys, even though I do think he probably should be more aggressive in that area than he has been in the past. He's got the money to do it. He's got a team, and I think I've talked about this on your show in the past, where, let's be honest, everything in that league works on windows. And Green Bay's still in the middle of their open window, but as the quarterback continues to age, and you start to run into some other issues, that window's not open forever. And, when Aaron Rodgers is 35, 6, 7 years old, it's not going to be the same window as it is today. And Green Bay's still in a position where, they don't need all that much. They certainly need some help, but they don't need, 4 Pro Bowl type players to catch Seattle or San Francisco. They need a couple of guys is really what they need. And, I mean, you guys saw that in the playoffs. The 3-point loss to the 49ers shows that Green Bay's not that far away from being back at the top of the league. Eddie Lacy was such a huge difference maker for them last year. He closed the gap almost by himself. Now they need to find a couple more guys like that, and I think they're back in the chase again for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go before, Rob. You had mentioned this on the show last time about Ted Thompson. History usually repeats itself, and Ted's in my mind, going to stay put. I love the optimism that Rappaport had in the article, and and you had even said to us, it would be nice if Ted Thompson went out and did spend a little bit of this money to do something. But the three of us are probably in agreement. There's not going to be a big splash in Green Bay. So what do you take on this rumor about bringing the Pickett back, Raji possibly coming back, after the comments that were made that they're going to try to let Capers get to the defense he wants? Do Raji and Pickett fit that bill, Rob? And do you think those would be two guys that he's going to spend some of that cap money on? Do you see either of them back in Green Bay?
Well, I think it makes sense for at least one of them guys to come back, because there's not, if they both do wind up leaving, there's not a bona fide nose on that team and in that front. They could try it, I guess, with Boyd, but I think he'd be overmatched. They need a guy 330, 335, 340, to play that position. And of course, Raji is more or less kicked outside over the last few years as Pickett has kind of taken over the nose job. They probably don't need both back, and my best guess is one comes back at whatever price is most, appealing or attractive to the Packers. They're not going to break the bank anymore on Raji. They're not going to give Pickett the $6 million he's made in the past. If both of these guys go out there, and one of them hits it big in free agency and the other's still floating around, come May or June, that's when I think one of them could eventually end up coming back to Green Bay. It's kind of hard to predict who that guy is going to be right now, because I think they're going to be looking maybe for opposite ends of the financial spectrum. I think Pickett's going to be willing to go a couple of years, short-term type of a deal, maybe 50% more, let's just say, than the veteran's minimum, where Raji's going to be looking for, the contract that he can live off for the rest of his life. And that's a pretty big difference. We'll see who bites on who in free agency. But I do think Green Bay needs at least one of those guys back just to play the kind of defense that Capers does want to play. I mean, I remember, guys, when Capers showed up there in 2009, and I said to him, if you could have a Pro Bowl type of player at just one position on your defense, for your defense to really play at a high level, where do you need, a stud, an absolute bona fide Pro Bowler to be? And he told me really it's two guys, maybe three, but kind of in order he prioritized it: nose, outside linebacker, and corner. Those three spots is where he really needs a stud. I mean, so he needs a stud at nose tackle. Pickett's probably not a stud anymore, and maybe you draft a guy if Pickett's the guy you end up bringing back. I would like to see Raji back, I guess, guys, at Green Bay's price and see what he can do again, just where he gets 80% of his snaps, let's just say, on the nose versus 25 or 30 of the percent of the snaps that he's got in the last few years on the nose. It would be interesting to see Raji go back to that position.
Yeah, I would agree. If Raji is the guy coming back, I definitely don't want him out at defensive end anymore. Which, in 2010, when he had probably the best year that he's had in his career, most of his play came, if I recall, over that nose. It was him and Howard Green kind of playing most of the nose. Now, sticking to the defensive side of the football, is a big free agent on that side. And when we talked before, it looked like Shields was going to look for about $9 million, $8 to $9 million, $8 to $9 million a year. And now it's coming out that he's more looking for a Tim Jennings-like contract that's more of a 4-year, $22 million with $8 million guaranteed. With that looking like the price he's going for, if you had to make the decision, would you pay him that? Do you think he is worth that, or would you let him test the market and walk?
I'll be honest, guys. If you could get Sam Shields for $4 and $22, I think you're getting a steal there, because there aren't many guys in the league, first of all, that run like Sam Shields. He's still an improving player. Let's remember, he didn't play this position until his senior year of college. He was a wideout his whole life. He's a guy that there's still quite a bit of upside there. He's become a much better tackler over the last couple seasons than he was when he first showed up in the league. He'll still cheat a little bit, and he'll peek in the backfield, and he gets caught on little things like that. But for the most part, I mean, you don't find a lot of guys like Sam Shields, that can run in the 4.3 range. I mean, those are extremely hard to find. He's not big like these Seattle corners, and that seems to be the trend of the way everybody in the league wants to go. But at the end of the day, Shields still has a chance, within a 12 to 24 month window, I guess is where I would look at it being, of him becoming a bona fide number one shutdown type of corner. He's not there yet. He's probably a really good 2 is where he's at now, but he's got a chance to be a 1 in this league. And at that price tag, and I'll be honest, guys, I don't think they can get him at that price tag, but if that was the price tag you could get him at, I would jump on that in a second.
I agree with you, Rob. When I heard the numbers, it was almost like my first thought is, does he want to have the hometown discount? Is that what he's giving the Packers, the ability to do that? Because I'm not sure if anybody would give him more, but when I look at the original number, I'm like, hey, we should jump on that one and just take care of that one as quick as we can if that's the ballpark that he wants to be in. But, we'll see what happens when free agency rolls around. You know how these agents work. Rob, you've been around this game a long time. Going out there and say, hey, this is where we want to start, but somebody might come in and throw some more cash in there. We don't know. Let's look at it from the perspective that Sam Shields leaves Green Bay. If that happens, Rob, now our safety play, I call it horrid at best last year. If Sam Shields then does leave, what do you think is then the status of our secondary, and what would we have to do at that point if Sam Shields leaves?
Well, I'm going to counter first of all, and I'll answer that question in a second. I don't think Shields is going to leave, because my best guess is that they can't get anywhere negotiation-wise. They will take Shields. I think they realize how valuable he is, and he'll come back for the 1 year, roughly $11 million type salary. Green Bay certainly got the room. I would be extremely surprised, if they let him just leave town and leave the building. But let's operate under your scenario that he does leave. Then I don't think there's any doubt you have to draft a corner, because there aren't enough good corners on that roster right now. I'm not sure you can go into next season and say, Williams and House are your starters. I don't think anybody over there would be comfortable, if Devon House has to play 60-plus snaps a game. I don't think that's a utopian, ideal type situation. I do think if they move forward with this, discussion of Hyde becoming a safety, much like Leroy Butler early in his career moved from corner to safety. I'm not saying Hyde's going to be Leroy Butler, but I think Hyde can be a pretty darn good football player. He's already trending in that direction. I think he had a very, very strong rookie season. He probably probably should be a safety, just the way he runs guys. He tackles extremely well. He's competitive as all heck. He's not the biggest guy on the planet by any means for that position, but I think he can turn into a pretty good safety. So let's just assume that he takes a lot of MB Jennings snaps, whatever various packages they're going to line him up and work out of. The return of Hayward is, and I guess we'll just assume he'll be healthy. It's probably a stretch to make that assumption, but let's operate under that kind of guesswork that they're going to get 12 to 14 games at least out of Hayward next year. That's a huge plus for the secondary. And Morgan Burnett's got to be better next year. There's no doubt about it. If he's not, then maybe they got to move on from him. I think the secondary can be better just with the players they have in-house, guys, but they do need to draft somebody high, whether that's a corner if Shields leaves or a safety, just to get a third safety there to go with Burnett and Hyde moving forward, because right now that they just don't have enough in the building, I think, to compete against the better offenses in football.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that, I think Shields needs to be back, especially with his age, and it's kind of what you're saying. I don't think House is quite to the point that you can trust him for extended periods of time out there. And if that's the case, then they're going to have to draft somebody pretty high when they have other, they're trying to rebuild the safety position. Now they're going to have to rebuild corner position as well. Now, going to the offensive side of the ball, James Jones being a free agent, and he just seems to have the worst luck when it comes to free agency. First time, the lockout happened, and now, the draft is loaded from what I've heard with receiver, and there's, free agent options out there. If James Jones does end up leaving via free agency, aren't the Packers really playing with fire, having really just Boykin, who's still developing, Cobb and Nelson as your wide receivers for this team? Because I don't know if there's anyone quite ready from the younger guys like Miles White or Dorsey that's ready to step up. And if that's the case, does wide receiver become a priority early in the draft, especially with Cobb and Nelson set to hit free agency?
Evan, you're right on track with where I was going, and I think I've been in the minority saying this. I've said it all along. I would not be shocked if Ted Thompson's first-round pick was on a wide receiver or certainly a tight end. Everybody's yelling and screaming, for Ted to go defense and go safety or corner or another inside linebacker, what have you. But Ted Thompson, since he showed up, has given Aaron Rodgers so many various weapons, to go to battle with, on a year in and year out basis. Greg Jennings was a second, in 06. Jones was a third round guy in 07. And the next year it's Jordy Nelson, as a second round pick in 08. He gets Cobb for him, as a second rounder in 11. Terrence Murphy was in there the 1 year too, I think. The second rounder who ended up getting hurt and only played a few games as a Packer. So Ted is always, and that doesn't even count Finley as a third. Ted has always given Rodgers a ton of weapons, and I'm sure as Ted looks right now and says, I'm really down to what? Nelson, Cobb, Boykin. I need to replenish that position. Grabbing a couple sevenths last year did not get it done. The bottom of that first round, guys, is going to be loaded with wide receivers that are going to be pretty good value there. Guys that, it's some guys, too, that can probably come in and play right away. The Beckham kid out of LSU, Allen Robinson from Penn State's going to be a late one. I think Mike Evans, the big kid from Texas A&M, was a lot like Jordy Nelson. I mean, there's a lot of wideouts, guys, that are probably going to go between 20 and 40. Don't be surprised to see Ted jump on one of those. He might even move back like he did the 1 year with Jordy Nelson if he feels he can get good value at pick 37 or something like that, 35. He may move back to early in the second round and snag one of those wideouts. I would not be shocked if that happens at all, Evan, because you're exactly right. They're going to need to get a couple more playmakers looking forward for Rodgers, because with Nelson and Cobb both up after the 2014 season, they are playing with fire a little bit. If they don't try to start getting a little bit younger at that position. Cobb was the last real high draft pick, the second and 11 that Ted used on a wide receiver. For Ted to go, this length of time, almost 3 years, years now without addressing wide receiver, at least early in a draft. That would surprise me quite a bit. So I think he's going to take a wide receiver pretty early for Rodgers moving forward.
I think you brought up a good point, Rob, and that's the draft. And everybody is dead set saying, when you look at that, we got to go defense. But I'm right on board with both of you guys. If we look at the contracts that are coming up, everybody's all focused on the now, but you have to have that outlook. What's going to happen down the road? Are we going to be able to afford to keep both Nelson and Cobb? It would be great, and we might be able to work it out. But we always have to have the what if, and we got to have that security blanket. But I'll tell you what, if Jones leaves and we don't replenish that, I like Boykin. I do. I think he's going to be a good player. But what is that, a 1-year fix? And then all of a sudden maybe we lose Nelson or Cobb. I don't know if I can live with that either. Because all of a sudden we go from having a very good receiving core to nothing at all. And then what does Rodgers do? Then we'll be complaining about that. With that said, Rob, when you look at it moving forward, the position that Evan and I talked about too is, what do you feel about getting a compliment for Clay Matthews and fixing our inside linebacker position? Do you think those are two positions that we can fulfill in the draft?
I'm not sure Ted sees it that way, guys. My guess is to Ted, the compliment to Clay Matthews was your first-round pick in 2012. It's Nick Perry, and he still needs to get, at least in Ted's mind, he's going to give Perry at least another year. My God, he gave Justin Harrell 3 years, didn't he?
Oh, don't even bring that.
Perry another shot.
Oh, did you really bring that name up?
And you talk about the. What's that?
I said, did you really bring that name back up, Justin Harrell? Oh my God.
My point is, it takes Ted a long time to move on from guys. If he's invested heavily in them, he's going to give him every chance in the world. I mean, look, Derek Sherrod's still on the team, isn't he, guys? I mean, they're going to live and die with their number one picks for as long as possible. I mean, so Perry's going to get another shot going, and that's working under the assumption Mike Neal leaves, which I think is a fair assumption. That Perry's going to get a chance as that complimentary guy next year. The inside linebackers, guys, it's just a little trickier. He's got a lot of money tied up in those two guys. For him to really say, all right, I'm going to take a second-round pick, use a second-round pick on an inside linebacker to replace Brad Jones or Hawk. I don't think he replaces Hawk. He replaced Jones, in all likelihood. But now he's going to have to cut somebody. There's going to be the cap ramifications if that comes about. Ted's going to have to probably make, it'll be an admission that he made a mistake on a contract like he did with Jones, which he did just 12 months ago in essence. So they definitely need to get better at those inside spots. History again, guys, shows us that Ted is married to A.J. Hawk, and for whatever reason, he's in love with Brad Jones. And it appears to me, my best guess is he's going to stay the course, and those two could be your starters next year again.
Yeah, if those two together are the starters again next year, I'm going to be extremely disappointed, because what the Packers lack in that middle is that big, physical, aggressive middle linebacker. Now, if it was that guy paired with Jones or that guy paired with Hawk, I think that would be okay. But they're just lacking that physicality up the middle, and that's why you see teams just running right at them, and no pressure from the D-line.
90 seconds.
Side middle linebackers in the middle. That's why you're getting 5, 6, 7 yards a carry, if not more. Now, one comment interests me from from Mike McCarthy at the Combine, and that's him talking about, and we're going back to the offense here, that he believes Jermichael Finley's going to play football next year. If the Packers aren't, as they do in the college, aren't interested in bringing him back, why does Mike McCarthy
60 seconds
in regard at the Combine? Is McCarthy thinking about bringing him back?
I would be very surprised, guys, if Finley wound up back in Green Bay. They still have an extremely conservative medical staff. I'd be hard-pressed to believe Green Bay is going to clear him and bring him back. Reading between the lines, and my best guess on that, guys, and again, this is only a guess, Mike McCarthy cares deeply. He really, really likes Jermichael Finley. They're both guys from Texas. They have a lot in common. They've become pretty close. in a love-hate relationship type of way over the last 5 years. Nobody's been in Mike McCarthy's office, called to the principal's office, probably more over the last handful of years than just
10 seconds.
But Mike McCarthy just loves the guy. And I think at the end of the day, McCarthy doesn't want to be the guy who sabotages him on any level by putting out any kind of comment that, we're not going to clear him or he can't play for whatever reason and stuff like that. I think Mike McCarthy was just being loyal to his guy there, a guy he really loves. And I'd be hard-pressed to believe, again, that Green Bay is the team that Finley ends up playing for down the road. But Mike McCarthy wants to see the guy play if Finley indeed does want to play in 2014 moving forward. And it sounds like Finley certainly does want that opportunity. And I think McCarthy was just doing everything possible to make sure that dream still exists for a guy like Finley.
Well, Rob, if he is cleared to play, do you think a lot of teams are going to show interest in him with that neck injury? I know that we're actually off the live show, but we're still on air. So give me your thoughts on that. If he's cleared to play, do you think he has a good future in free agency? Do you think some teams will take a look at him?
Guys, this it only takes one. And if he is cleared, I think his chances of moving forward and playing in the league are pretty good. My understanding is his neck injury is slightly different than Collins. Collins couldn't get cleared, by anybody, or nobody felt safe enough, to give him that chance. I have a feeling Finley's going to play again. I'm not sure it's the, brightest decision ever if he does have this insurance policy that him and his agent keep talking about, that he can cash in, never play again, and cash in for $10 million tax-free. Because here's what baffles me, guys, is I don't think the market for Jermichael Finley is going to be very strong. I think he's going to wind up playing at a pretty low-level type of a contract. It's going to come down, I think, to Finley not getting a lot of play, and he'll have to settle for, probably not the veterans minimum, but maybe, 2 years, $3 million, something like that, where he was obviously looking at this, he's 27 years old, as his huge contract, 5 years for 30 or 35 or whatever it was going to turn out to be. So he's going to take a pretty severe financial hit. If he goes and he plays for somebody, he can't play very long, and he passes on that insurance policy. So it's a really tricky situation. Obviously, but my guess is Finley's going to get a chance from somebody and play again, but he's not going to play for very much money.
Well, thanks, Rob. Evan, you got any last comments? I know that the live show is done, but we are still recording on our iPhone and for YouTube. But any last comments for Rob, Evan?
No, just thanks for willing to come on. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I did have a couple other points I wanted to touch on, but we can probably save that for another time. But just thank you for coming on. It's always, like I said, a pleasure talking to you, and you're welcome on anytime.
Well, it's always good to be with you guys. Hopefully I'll see you soon, Evan.
Yeah, Rob, I got this whole list of things, Rob. I could sit here and talk to you probably for 4 or 5 hours. I love your insight.
We'll do that. We'll do that next time over drinks.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
I don't know if people would like the ramble with us having drinks. I mean, the language might get a little out of hand, and some of the comments might be a little bit crazy. But it's always great to have you on the show, Rob. Like I said, I love your insight. It's great talking to you and hearing what you have to say about the Packers. But like Evan said, you're always welcome on the show, and we're definitely going to invite you to come back a few more times, especially as free agency heats up, as the draft goes through. I'd love to have you on the show. So thanks again, Rob, for coming on, bud.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.
So with that said, everyone, we hope you enjoyed having our guest Rob Reischel on the show. He's always a great Packer insight with a lot of great knowledge. With that said, I will wrap it up with this. Tomorrow, we are going to welcome a very special guest from the Johnstown Tomahawks, which is an NAHL hockey team right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're going to welcome Jason Spence to the show, and we're going to get some insight as to what the NAHL is. And Evan and I will definitely love our time with Mr. Spence, the coach of the Tomahawks. With that said, everyone, hope you enjoyed the show. Have a great night. We'll get back at you tomorrow.